The recent news of a popular emulator being shut down by Nintendo has once again caused questions about emulation, preservation, piracy, and all that. And while we've had this good news about this before, I think I finally settled on what I would think is the best case scenario for emulation when it comes to the game industry. And for today's critical thought, I'm going to share all that with you. The discussion about emulation and preservation has always been a hot button topic among developers, consumers, and people kind of in the media or game journalism space. And it has always been one that, again, for those of you who are longtime fans, you know that my thoughts has always been 100% on preservation. But the problem, especially over the last decade, has been trying to decide what is the best kind of case or scenario for preserving a game. Because at the end of the day, it has to be respectful to the game, to the consumers, and of course to the creators who made it. And our first point is that we need to kind of separate what we're talking about here. A lot of people, when we say emulation, they think of one of two things. Either A, this is about playing games 20, 30 years ago on any and every available device. Maybe some days we'll have candy bars where while you're eating it, you can play Doom E1M1 on them. The other idea is that day one of a new game being out, I can go on to and download the game and play it for free and never give the developer 1 cent. And this is kind of the argument that a lot of developers who are 100% against emulation will stay. They don't want you to be able to download a game day one and play it for free. Duh. And this actually takes me to another point that I want to mention regarding emulation and preservation. When we're talking about, again, the distinctions between what people think about emulation and preservation, there is this argument about being able to emulate a current gen game. Let's say I buy Zelda on the Switch, but I want to play this on my PC. Well, should I be allowed to emulate a game that is still being sold or still being available today, even if I bought it on its original platform? It's a very interesting quandary, and I want to know what everyone thinks about this before I share my thoughts. My opinion on this, in a way, is no. I don't think it's fair to emulate a game that is still being sold, that is still being actively bought and sold in the market today. I am not a fan of console exclusivity. I don't like closed platforms myself. But it's still within their legal right to say, if you want to play a Nintendo game, you gotta buy a Nintendo platform. Or Sony platform until they hopefully put their games on PC. And again, while that's not perfect for everyone, it's still how this market works for them. And like I said, when we're talking about emulation and what I want, this is not, again, about just being able to come home one day, look at the new releases on Steam or Nintendo, whatever, go to a website and download them all for free and play them. And again, it's why it's important to set these limits for when a game when a game is considered end of life in this respect. But again, when we talk about this from an artistic and from a preservationist standpoint, at some point, every video game, no matter if it's a Super Mario Odyssey, a Helldivers 2, even something like Legend of Zelda, is going to reach an end of shelf life or end of life period. And again, for some games, it could be a year, 3 years, 10 years. It doesn't matter. But you see, the problem whenever we have this discussion is that we can't just make a rule that only works for a quarter of the industry, a half of an industry, because that doesn't really set any precedent on this issue. So I gave my thoughts on this about, I think, a year or two ago, and I think I finally settled on what I think would be fair. So, as always, let me know what you think about this in the comments down below. So what I'm going to do is we're going to kind of work our way backwards. We're going to start with old games. So the first category are games where the system is dead. It is sunsetted. You are literally not going to be able to access this game on its original medium and in a way support that developer. So we're talking pre-internet era consoles. So this would be, I think, before Xbox. I want to say before Xbox. I'm not sure the Xbox had built-in internet or not. But let's say pre-2000s consoles. So for these games, again, there is no way you're going to be able to play them legally on those original platforms. That, to me, is 100% preservation. That should be up and available, and everyone should be able to play them. See, as another point, this is also the era where copyrights and IP ownerships get very, very, very murky, with studios and creators leaving, companies being sold in bits and pieces, and there are a lot of games during like the 80s through to the early 2000s that there is literally no way, shape, or form they would be ever available for a legal purchase. I'm looking at something like No One Lives Forever as an example of this. And at this point, these games are not meant, or they're not considered sellable in today's market. A general consumer is not sitting there thinking, do I want to play Elden Ring today, or do I want to play Snake Rattle and Roll for the NES? And I know what someone's going to ask. What about studios who have an online catalog of their games, like Nintendo, like Sony, Microsoft, and so on? And this is where it may get a little bit controversial. I don't care about those. If we were talking 5-7 years ago, my opinion would be different on this matter. But you see, what's changed is that I'm fine with spending a one-time purchase to acquire a game digitally. I'm not fine with those digital purchases being locked to a console. Because again, all we're doing is just resetting the clock. At some point, the Switch is no longer be available, just like how the Wii is not really being sold anymore. So there has to be, again, a point where we have to say that a game is just going to be available for everyone. And maybe, again, if the consoles did things differently and I could acquire their games for legal, or legally speaking, on the PC, this would be a different discussion. You know, if I wake up tomorrow and I see Mario and F-Zero and Zelda on Steam, oh, and since we're going to go, really crazy, let's go all the way down to Wonderland at this point, and they'll all have full and fully accepted modding support. And then later on that day, the unicorns and the leprechauns will come out of the sky and give us all gold and heart stars and horseshoes everywhere for everyone to enjoy. But until that happens, there needs to be a way to be able to play these games that, again, the ones that we're talking about in this category, the original developer is no longer around. That studio has closed. Those creators are long gone in that respect. There is literally no way that I can give someone money and have it go towards supporting that game or that studio. And as another point, what we're talking about also creates a clear definition between the original version of a game and the remake of a game. So, Resident Evil 4 Original and Resident Evil 4 Remake are considered two separate products. If a studio wants to create a super fancy deluxe remake of a game, such as what we saw with Super Mario RPG or Remaster, that is perfectly fine. What we're talking about is the original version being played on original hardware. With that said, now we have to jump forward. And we need to set a standard or a definition for when a modern game is no longer available, when, again, it's considered end of life in terms of the market. And again, this is a lot trickier, because we're not talking about games that are 20, 30 years old. We're going to be talking about games that are a year old, 3 years old, 2 months old. Because remember, for a lot of games, you're looking at between maybe 15 to 30 days after release for your game to be considered hot. And if after that point your game hasn't made a good amount of sales, it unfortunately goes quietly into the shadow realm for an undisclosed amount of time, as I'm sure every indie developer is well aware of. But there's always cases of games that can blow up again. Again, stuff like Among Us, games seeing a second or even a third life, games that receive massive modding support and functionality. And again, this is where it gets very murky, and why it is oftentimes very difficult to kind of say a one-size-fits-all to all games. So here are my thoughts on this, and what we're talking about right now are consoles. These are closed platforms. We're not talking about the PC or live service games yet in this video. For a console, I would say 3 years after the console has shut down. So that is, the console is no longer in production anymore, copies are kind of limited. 3 years after a console has reached that point, the games on it should go to emulation and preservation. And I know someone's going to argue with me down below, well, what? 3 years seems way too soon. People just wait that long. And my argument to that is this. If someone is going to play the super long con of, I will wait 5 to 7 years plus an additional 3 years for your console to hit that point before I play your game, they were never going to buy your game at all. And you're going to have to come to terms with that. But the point about this is that, again, consoles are closed platforms. There should come a point where those games should be available for everyone to play. Because again, the console is not being supported anymore. Then there has to be a means of being able to access those games. There are a lot of games, even just from like 2000 to maybe 2012, 2013, that we don't have access to anymore because of it. We haven't been discussing an open platform yet, and especially live service games, because this is when things get even murkier for a lot of games and studios. So, an open platform, a PC. Again, for PC games, no matter how big, how small they are, if there is a fan base for them, they can keep them alive almost indefinitely. As we've been seeing new Doom mods, Quake mods, mods for Celeste, Stardew Valley, 3 mods for Skyrim that are available. And this is where it gets a little bit harder, because PC games, again, don't have that limitation, or it's not as stringent as a console. If Sony says one day, you know what, PlayStation 5 done, we're never making another one of those ever again, well, guess what? You're never going to get another new PlayStation 5 ever again at that point. The clock, or the time, or the countdown has begun. But for PC, again, as long as it's available on Steam or on some digital store, we will have access to those games almost indefinitely. Again, the day that Steam crashes or Steam goes away forever, I'm pretty sure that's the signal of the apocalypse. So we may have other issues to be concerned with, as opposed to just being able to play Super Meat Boy again. But to bring us back to this conversation about emulation and preservation, the trick about this is that we need to set something that works for everyone. As my lights just flickered there, maybe that's an important sign. If we just say this only works for half the games, or quarter of the games, then we're right back to where we started. So here are my thoughts about an open platform. Once a game is no longer being developed, as in there is no new content being released that is used to market or keep this game in kind of the sales eye. So, no new DLCs, no expansions, no content that can add to this game that will convince someone, hey, I should give this game $19.99, $14.99, $30, whatever. At that point, I would say 10 years. Because again, the reason why I'm giving it such a long time is that these games can sell for a very long time. There are people who are discovering games like Stardew Valley, like Factorio, you name it, Terraria, many other games. And these games are as good as they are 1 year old, 5 years old, 10 to 15 years old. But again, we need to set some kind of ground rule. that if a game is not being developed anymore, again, we're not talking live service yet, we'll get to that next, but if a game has completely sold, it's 10 years later, there's been no new major updates. And again, I'm saying major updates so that someone doesn't turn around and say, well, 9 years and 364 days, I will release a patch that lets players change the color of the title text, and thereby I get another 10 years of protection. No, it doesn't work that way. To me, I think this is a fair trade, because it's going to allow developers more than enough time to earn any and all available sales. It also provides consumers with this idea that these games can still be played, because even open platform games, even games on the PC, can still run into issues as hardware and technologies evolve. Again, there is a period where on PC, 4 megabits of RAM was considered a luxury. Megabits. I didn't say gigabytes, megabytes, I should say, of them. So there has to be, again, some kind of control or some kind of point where we can say that a game has reached its peak saturation. And even if the game is being modded, again, this is about what the developer is putting into it. There are games, again, that have received years of modding, partial and full conversion mod support. But that original game may not have been touched for 10, 15 years. And I do feel that at least a 10-year buffer is more than fair. Now, let's get to the final point. Live service. So, this is where kind of Josh's hammer drops really hard. Live service games have gone very fast. When a server or the authentication server, the official server, when that gets taken down, that game is gone. Now, again, when we say gone, some people can have third-party servers, modded servers, and stuff like that. But the legal way of playing these games disappears in a matter of minutes. There have been many mobile games, many live service games. There have even been retail games that have been lost this way. As we all know, EA was infamous, and they may still be, about requiring online authentication for a single-player game. I can't play a game that I bought, SimCity Societies, anymore, because guess what? The server that authenticates all installations, even through Origin, mind you, is no longer working. It's gone. So that game is just literally dead. So, for this point, here are my thoughts, and this should be very easy to understand. The day after a live service game of any kind, mobile, single, MMO, whatever, the day after those servers are shut down, it should be allowed to go into emulation and preservation. No questions asked. And the reason why is that these are games that people have spent money on. They are games that people have legally acquired. And to say one day, well, we don't want to support this anymore, thanks for your $30, $100, whatever, don't let the door hit you on the way out, that's not right. And again, these are games where once these servers are turned off, they are unplayable. You literally cannot play them through a legal means. And that, to me, is just not right when it comes to games. And again, how many MMOs have we lost from like 2000 to 2015? How many mobile games, how many live service titles have completely disappeared without trace because either the game didn't do well, it didn't do well enough, or the developer or publisher said, I don't want to keep these servers up anymore, and they pulled the plug. So in this respect, once these games, and again, once their server shut off, they're not making any more money. Like, it's gone. It should go straight to preservation. And I think with these rules I've set, this should be fair to everyone. It should give developers more than enough time to earn their fair share for their monetization, It should allow platforms to keep earning their money, and it should, at least in my mind, provide adequate protection and preservation for any video game, whether it is 2 months old, 5 months old, 10 years old, 30 years old, whatever. Because at the end of the day, whenever these arguments and discussions about emulation preservation comes up, it is always a bad reminder of just how terrible this industry is at keeping these games available and preserving what a lot of people can be considered art. So to end on, I have one final point I always like to make in these videos. You may love games like Helldivers 2, Tears of the Kingdom, pick any game, Balatrio, The Last of Us 2, Spider-Man 2, or Marvel Spider-Man 2. Anything like that you have played in the last 1 to 3 years. Well, if we don't do anything about preservation, all those games are nothing but trash. And they will be thrown out, and you will never be able to play them ever again. And I'm sure a lot of people love comparing games like Elden Ring or a Zelda game to trash. Let me know what you think about that one in the comments down below. But again, this is a problem that it gets more and more important to fix with each and every year. This video is being recorded just in the beginning of March of 2024. There are discussions, of course, of when the next console cycle is going to happen. Again, very soon, in terms of relative speaking, the Switch, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, they're going to be considered old news. Yesterday's trash. And what are we going to do then about this issue? That's going to do it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to do the YouTubing stuff people tell you to do. If you're interested in more of my thoughts on design, check out my books wherever they are sold. Visit our Discord and Patreon, and come back for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where you some of the art and science of games.